depends who's saying my name, Sharon. When my father, Arthur Oxford, would say my name, it would be Sandra. And when my relatives from South America would say my name, it was Sandra. So it really depends on who's saying the name. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the wonderful grounding and energy that was accompanied with this invitation to come speak here today. So thank you very much. Happy New Year to everyone. And I would like to begin with a reminder. And I've always admired Eleanor Roosevelt, and I feel that she really has given a language to a lot of the spirit and the work that many of us here in this room, virtually, and throughout the world have done to really care for our neighbors and reach for the best in each other. So this is from Eleanor Roosevelt. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet, they are the world of the individual person. In the neighborhood he lives in, the school or the college he attends, the factory, the farm, or the office he works. Such are places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without a concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world. And to that I will say amen. My name is Sandra Oxford, better known in roller derby as Sandstorm. I complement all of my activism work and all of the political work I do with really trying to care for myself. And I have found an incredible community across the world, across the country, in the state of New York, and in our region with a lot of my family on 8 wheels. So I just want to say that, because I think it's important for many of us when we are engaged in pouring out that we replenish ourselves in some way. So you may think it's odd that I find high impact intensity roller derby that, but in a sense it is, and there is a bit of fellowship there as well. Thank you for the just the brief bio there. You know, my experience here as the child of immigrants has really been what birthed my interest in standing with and accompanying immigrant communities. I live right now in Fallsburg and Hurleyville, and I'm not sure if most folks realize, but here in our rural community, here in a rural county in the state of New York, I live in a school district where 70% of the students are Latino students, and their families speak Spanish at home. So much of that, when we look and we just boil it down here in Sullivan County, is really a microcosm, I believe, of what we see across this country. Many people settle here in our rural area because they can connect to the rural landscape, they can connect to the lifestyle. Many folks are displaced farmers from other parts of the world, or some are just folks who have resided in communities that resemble and have just the essence of the rural nature that we have, the closeness that we have here. So I don't want that to get lost, because despite having this accent from 124th Street, Jamaica, Queens, I am really an advocate for rural communities. I raise my children in these communities. I've seen how children can flourish in these communities. And I see that when we have a little bit of support that comes in, when we get some attention, that we really can move mountains with small grains of sand here in our communities. I'm incredibly thankful and immensely thankful that I've been part of a larger and bigger mobilization that has existed in the realms of immigration, in the realms of immigrant rights, workers' rights, human rights, rights to access to health care, and um, you know, without going too deep into that, we are right now at this very, it feels like deja vu in some cases, because we've been here before, but maybe not, you know. I'm very hopeful. And I think this is the right way for me to start off the next 4 years, is right here with the UU in NARROWSBURG, and getting grounded in this energy that we have to do, and hopefully the vision that we are going to co-create together. Um, the last election, without going too deep of a dive, was, I believe, was a moment of desperation for many people. Many people felt in the midst of this affordability crisis, in the midst of their children not being able to escape from your basements because they can't get a mortgage, because they cannot afford a home, because they can barely afford to be renters, because we see that whether we go to the grocery store, we're paying utility bills, or we're trying to access care for our loved ones, that there has just been such a pressure put on people, that people in this country have made a decision, and they've made a determination, and they are putting their money where they believe they're going to get the strongest bang for their buck. I don't necessarily agree with the decision that many of the Americans made in this past election, but we have to live with this. It almost reminds me of when some of us were fighting against casino gambling here, and finally when we passed the legislation to change the state constitution to allow state-sanctioned gambling in the state of New York, Sullivan County had the highest percentage of people in the entire state that voted for that. So that was my cold pail of water that said to me, you know what, this is the new ecosystem, and this is what you have to work with. So for me, this past election, in a sense, is that lens that I'm looking at this through. This is what people really believed. The working class people stayed home from this past election. As much as work as many of us were involved in, a healthy democracy relies on people coming out and relies on people participating. But 2024 was the lowest turnout in years, especially here in the state of New York, for New York voters. Approximately 800,000 traditional Democratic voters stayed home in the state of New York. So that is just, I didn't create that, but I'm just, this is where we are right now. So what is ahead for 2025? I feel that it is going to be an opportunity for wise people, for the people in our community that we trust. It may not be new people. It may be the same people that we know, the same people that we've been organizing with. But it's, as I've been saying, it's time to get the band back together again, folks, and to be sure that we are able to ensure that Eleanor's statement can take root here in our communities where we are. The last time this administration came into office, if you remember, they started with a Muslim ban. You remember that, right? And that was an executive order that was thankfully challenged, and 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 then we saw even more of these erosions of separating people from their rights. So this practice, I think, is part of what is at the heart of rings alarms for me, because any administration that puts so much effort into separating people from their rights, put the immigration moment aside, even for our LGBTQIA community, where we see some of our neighbors are concerned about their rights. They are concerned about the status of their marriages. They are concerned about the status of their families, their adoptions. They are concerned about this knee-jerk reaction to separate people from their rights. And I pay attention to that a lot when even in the criminal justice realm, because we see that is to me a shadow of the authoritative type of impulse that this style of governing is going to bring. Getting back to immigrants, here in New York State, at the end of my conversation, I included, I didn't want to show the data, but I included where I got this data from. And I think it's really important for us to have a good understanding of the reality. So if we deport 11 million immigrant plus earners from this country, what will that look like? What will that look like in the country? What will that look like to our state? Immigrants are incredibly diverse. 3/4 of what we see right now, 1/3 of the immigrants that we see are from Latin America, Mexico, Central America, South America, a portion from the Caribbean. We see 20% of the group that comes from Asian countries, also 7% from Eastern or Western European, and 4% from Africa. The individual countries of birth, I think, which is greatest right now in this country, I would say, from what I've seen, is Mexico, China, El Salvador, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Ecuador, Honduras, India, and Jamaica. So that is really a snapshot of what's going on here locally. I joke with friends because we have a lot of industrious families from Mexico that have set up shop, and they usually put a restaurant or a store in the community in the heart of town. But it's really not just the Mexican community that's here. You know, we have a very strong Central American community. And if you listen, you'll hear more and more patois is being spoken from the Caribbean. There's a whole Haitian community that has come in to get mistaken for African Americans. So when you just ask a few questions to some of the newcomers here to the Hudson Valley, to the Delaware Valley corridor, you're going to find more and more folks that left the city and are trying to put their roots and raise their families here. The majority of jobs that we find immigrants working in, undocumented immigrants regrettably find themselves in very low wage labor situations because of their status, because of the migration status. So that is a stressor that people feel. But when we look at retail, restaurants, construction, housekeeping, building services, it's estimated that 17% work in the service sector as well. So as someone who was, all of this for me was tripped as being an advocate for workers' rights. I did not understand the nuance of what workers faced in this country or in the state until I left New York City. I lived between Ulster and Sullivan counties, and I've lived in agricultural areas. So to see prior to 2019 in the state of New York that most agricultural workers were facing horrific conditions, and they were not given a day of rest, they were excluded from all labor law that was kind of protecting most other workers in this country because of some long held over Jim Crow that thankfully we were able to remedy here in the state of New York. But that doesn't mean that everything is like roses and unicorns for agricultural workers here in the state of New York. The problem is that when we have a gain, and because many of these workers are undocumented, we are still defending those wins. So despite the law changing in 2019, here we are going into 2025, and we have still had to fight at the state constitution level, where this law has been challenged by growers in the state, and many of the workers still remain very fearful. and they have not fully lived into all the rights that they have as a worker here, out of fear that if they get injured on the job that they're going to just be dismissed. But no, now they're covered by workers' comp, yet we still don't have folks taking advantage of that because of the climate. And I think that we, as citizens and as activists, we can do so much to create a climate where we can educate our neighbors, where we can develop their leadership. I believe that this is an important part. If everyone who wants to support undocumented people or people whose status, because we're not just talking about undocumented people, with this administration, there are threats to immigrants who hold status. So temporary protective status, TPS, our dreamers, all of these statuses are temporary statuses that are renewable and that people have to renew, but that they could be diminished, and these programs could end in the same way Obama established the Dreamers through an executive order. Is the concern that we have that these programs could be diminished. These programs are incredibly successful. When you look at these programs and you see that, in particular, TPS and the Dreamers program are very successful immigration programs. Many of these individuals are professionals. They've been able to work. They've been able to get their education. They've been able to buy property. They've been able to contribute in a meaningful way to the tax bases of our communities. So from that, through that lens, if I could just invite everyone to go back down memory lane. I don't know if anyone recalls when about 300 workers were unceremoniously dismissed in Liberty at a place called Ideal Snacks. A new parent company took it over, and they did the I-9, which means they were reviewing everyone's status for their work papers to be able to work illegally in the country. And 300 workers were dismissed. To use that as an example for the Village of Liberty and the panic that happened, not just for the workers, but for the municipality itself, where we were talking with landlords who were very concerned because their buildings were about, families were packing up and they were like, we got to go find employment someplace else. So when we started doing this deep dive and really seeing like, wow, Liberty's a village of renters. We have about 30% of the immigrant population that is preparing to leave the municipality. What does that do to a municipality? And thankfully, with the help of everyone, and I'm sure this congregation was involved directly and indirectly through their statewide coalition and through their statewide support, we were able to bring things down a bit and have one-on-one conversations with translators, with the community, with elected officials, with formal officials from the community to really understand the contributions that individuals make. This is super, super important. And I cannot overstress the importance of the faith community. And in every one of these crisis moments, it has always been a faith body that has stepped forward, right? These very sensitive conversations were inside the sanctuary of the Methodist Church. When we saw that these separations were happening at the border when Trump came in, Trump 01 came in, we had another series of sensitive conversations in Monticello with the Episcopal Church and the Interfaith Council that was there, sitting down with our local law enforcement. This is something so crucial. And we learned back then that because of where we are, nobody wanted to talk about a sanctuary. Okay, nobody wanted to bring that attention of sanctuary because it was felt by the more right wing of our community that this would put a target on us. But yet, when we broke down all the elements of what it meant to not participate with our local law enforcement, with ICE, to notify in our courts when ICE was around, to work with us when people were being pulled over. At that time, immigrants had lost the privilege of driving in the state of New York, which they've regained through a lot of advocacy work. We came to what I can only call was like a community compact at the church, at St. John's Episcopal Church, with the help of the faith community and local county law enforcement, to really begin building trust and understanding what we were going to do when things went wrong, and how we were going to try to keep relationships and communication open despite the stress. Interesting thing about immigration and immigration detention, unlike criminal detention, when someone is detained criminally, there's a very formal process with how to be undetained. So you're jailed, they take you in, and then you have to go in front of the judge, and you do a lot of stuff to return back to the community. In immigration, because of the backlog, because of the ridiculousness of how inefficient the system and broken that it is, we've discovered that we can actually, our relatives, our family members who are detained, that with enough pressure, and if they have been lawful, if they have not committed any crimes that make them a risk to the rest of the community, we can have an impact. The clergy can have an impact. Faith communities can have an impact. College students can have an impact. And sympathizers and family members can have an impact to return members back in while they're going through the immigration process. So I think when we were in a similar space last time, and it felt like we were in a dark room reaching around for a light switch to find the light, we did find points of light, and we did find ways to illuminate forward and to help our neighbors. But you know, this past summer, we saw immigrants being used as political fodder, and they were being bused and shipped to democratically run, where there were Democratic governors, and just creating a crisis. And that is something else. This crisis, a lot of it was by design, right? Because the last time this country really had a conversation about immigration reform and comprehensive immigration was back in 2013. And if you recall, who was in the front of that? That really was the last time we talked about immigration in this country, and we almost had something that was 2013. So the Senate passed, and we had Republicans standing with Democrats, but the bill failed, and we've never really had anything since then. While there was a border protection bill that became another political soccer ball that was being kicked around in 2024 and was shot down at the end, that had more to do with enforcement. And that had more to do with trying to get the immigration system up to speed to address the volume and the complexities that we are now seeing in this system in immigration. So, I know my neighbors are terrorized. I know my neighbors watch 24-hour news in Spanish, like we do in English, and it is exhausting. And, you know, I am constantly in conversation with individuals, asking them to turn off the TV and to just try to start plugging into their own security and their own safety and to do what they need to do. Last time, we did not see any threat at churches. We did not see any threat at the child care centers where people were dropping off Head Start, where there are a lot of immigrant students go. We did not see these threats at the hospital. However, here, here where we are, we're a little bit insulated. Some of our neighbors up on the northern border, when you are, I didn't realize this until the last administration, the last Trump administration, but Homeland Security, and when you are at a border, it's a whole different, it's not a choice because they have border patrol that are 50 miles from the border into the community, where many, some of the UU I know in Rochester, because I was there with them, where they had to actually go and stand after church at the supermarket so people could go shop without the fear of the border patrol snatching up families. The same thing happened at the migrant and agricultural Head Start programs up there, and there was a lot of pushback from churches that this would never happen at you know at a sanctuary because that was always seen as sacred. Hospitals, schools, all of these things. So I want to plant those seeds because I think it's important. And I think that in a rural area like ours, where it's just so diverse, and maybe you have concentrations in Liberty, Fallsburg, and Monticello, but you have some of these outlier districts that they need support just as much. And maybe because they don't have the density, it doesn't mean that they're not feeling the pinch of some of these knee-jerk reactions that an overzealous person who is working in a school attendance area may automatically think that they are emboldened to start checking the students' immigration status while they're being enrolled in school. This is one of the first this is one of the first areas that we see with families where they are concerned. They are afraid to put their children in school because they are afraid. And the more that we can do to be sure that the school has a layer of welcoming, a layer of solidarity, and an understanding. It doesn't have to be for everyone. It may just be a dozen students, but it's still important and it's still impactful. What time? Am I okay with time? Oh,
Yes, you're fine.
okay, all right. So I think that, you know, because we hear a lot of crazy stuff, and I don't want to be reactionary to all of these wild policies that are being floated right now, and we are being threatened with. And they're going back, way back to when there were internment camps in this country and trying to wave around some of those pieces of law that justified that. I don't, I want to be able to continue to reach for the best in people. And I think that I am going to try that, and I'm here with you folks. So that helps me, that roots me in that. During this recent entrance of migrants in through the border and what we saw here coming through the Delaware and Hudson Valley up from the New York City corridor, um, you know, it really was a very diverse group of people. And the it's it's shifted and it's changed. I've served for about 17 years as a board member for what was originally Farm Worker Legal Services, and it's now a little law clinic that is the Worker Justice Center of New York. We work predominantly with low-wage workers in agricultural and rural areas. And, you know, from what we've seen, there used to be this resentment with the trafficking that was happening over the border, because the way it worked 10 years ago was you were trafficked over the border and then you were in debt. And there were times when it was the employer where you were going who paid to traffic you. So you were paying to your employer every week an amount to cover that cost. Okay? And there was a lot of resentment, and there was a lot of just, it was different because through the Worker Justice Center of New York, you know, we only deal in work trafficking. Okay, you could go to the website and see, wow, work trafficking, yeah, there's a lot of human trafficking that goes on, and there is in that, it's a much smaller demographic, but there is a demographic of individuals who get trafficked specifically and exploited because of their legal status or lack of status. But today, these traffickers are seen almost like heroes. And when we talk to some of these migrants from Venezuela who have traveled for months, you know, when I met some of these folks that were placed at the Knights Inn in Liberty, like folks had been traveling between 16 and 9 months just to get to the Knights Inn in Liberty, of all places, where we had to get them out within 36 hours. If folks don't know anything about the Knights Inn in Liberty, but it is an open-air drug market, and prior to the Hochul administration busing them to the Knights Inn, there was a tragic stabbing of a child, a 1.5-year-old, who stabbed their sibling with a fentanyl needle and passed away. So it was a terrible tragedy, but it was even worse headline had we not gotten this group out of that environment. How do we explain this to people? How do we talk to people in a way? How do we get people to understand our neighbors who are just maybe 1 or 2 steps away from the Knights Inn themselves because of their own economy? How do we get them to understand? Because I know that with some of the research that just happened in 2024, this migrant crisis is not popular. There's very little empathy for it right now because people don't know how they're going to pay their own situation. That the spirit, I believe, of this past election is we need to take care of our own. But when we look deeper and when we start looking at the economics and really where the contributions are and how the contributions are made, you know, when anyone works on the books, they have to pay into Social Security. And when you are an undocumented immigrant, that is a benefit that you pay into that you don't receive. But there is an immense, what they called the Social Security Suspended Fund. And that suspended fund is folks who have not paid, who have paid into a system, but they will not be claiming that system. When we look at the state, 6 states in this country really raise a tremendous amount of money from tax revenue from undocumented immigrants, according to 2022 data that I included in my slide at the end. And New York State, undocumented immigrants contribute $3.1 billion to our state economy here, which is significant. And it's also estimated that if they were able to be legal, that they would be making more of a contribution. And that's why I love these young policy wonks. Get yourself a young policy wonk to be able to do all this data and to show you the contributions to property taxes, the contributions to sales taxes, the contributions to all of these taxes. And in the state of New York, undocumented immigrants are able to claw back a small amount, maybe like between $300 and $500, when they use something called an ITIN, which is the earned tax credit, and the tax identification number, which is the I-10. It allows the immigrant to put forth a state record that they've worked in the state, and ultimately why that is important is because when people want to become legal here, they have to show that they were not a burden to this country and that they actually worked and that they filed their earnings with the state. But you know, when we have these earned income tax credits and all these things, they don't get any of that. They don't benefit from that. I normally am not giving flowers to a lot of these statewide elected officials, but I must admit that I have an incredible affinity for our state comptroller. State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli, who has authored, his office has authored two incredible documents that I always bring to the Sullivan County Legislature with me. One is on rural communities and another one is on agricultural communities here in the state of New York. And why they are so important is because it really talks about how we need to be sure that our economy and that it flourishes, and that in the long run that we do have a sustainable economy. There's an aging that is happening in our communities. The county to the what is Delaware County considered north? Okay, so the county to the north of us has seen the most decrease in salary, in population than any county in the state of New York. I was at a rural roundtable in December with at the comptroller, where folks from Delaware County, the state comptroller assembled about 9 counties, rural counties together, and I had no idea what was happening in Delaware County. I had no idea about the collapse of the public good. What happens when you have double-digit people leaving your county, how that has an impact on your public health, what kind of impact that has on your public schools, and what kind of impact that has on your social services, and also the not-for-profit infrastructure that goes to caring for communities. So, you know, with all of this exodus, and I wish and I hope, if I could, I should have lit a candle. If I could have lit a candle here, now my candle would be a hope that there be better collaboration and communication across the spectrum. Because when immigrants were just being bandied across the country to these Democratic governors, here in New York, the weakness was there was never any communication with the advocates. There was not one moment where the advocate community was sat down with these contract agencies to try to figure out how to untangle these knots of how do we welcome the stranger? How do we ensure that things go in a much more seamless way without the chaotic, just the chaotic introduction of these new people into our neighborhoods of what we saw, what we lived through. And because that did not happen. You know, what happened is that when these individuals are being sent to communities, some of us just get these random phone calls from back channel insiders that are telling us there's 2 buses of migrants coming to your community, get ready. And that's exactly what happened here in Sullivan County, in Rockland County, in Orange County, in Ulster County, and in Dutchess County. So I want to pause there because I feel like I've spoken a lot, and I want people to be able to just give me a little bit of direction or feedback, or if there's a question that anyone has on what's next.
What are those 6 states that you want?
Oh, sure.
Besides,
Look at my notes. I have that. If not in my notes, it's in the immigration data. Here we go. California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, and New Jersey. Yeah. So it's over $1 billion each. California is 8.5 billion, Texas is 4.9 billion, New York is 3.1 billion, Florida is 1.8 billion, Illinois is 1.5 billion, New Jersey is 1.3 billion. And that is on the federal level. And, you know, New York has to be careful politically because 40% of our budget comes from the federal government, right? So we can't go at this alone. We have to figure out how to play nice in the sandbox to keep our ship afloat during this next administration.
Sandy, would you mind sharing a little bit about your recent appointment?
Sure. So, you know, I'm very thankful that I had the great occasion to be part of a movement, which is a movement of federally qualified health centers here in the United States. In the United States, for the last 50 years, we have seen a movement of citizens setting up their own community health programs with the support of the federal government. And for about 19 years, I've served as a board member on one of our FQHCs, which is the largest FQHC in the country. It's here in New York, and it's called Sun River. And thankfully, Sun River was one of the organizations that, you know, when they're fussing migrants or when we have 300 people unceremoniously dismissed or whatever, we always bring in people who can address some of the medical issues because our community often does not have access to primary care, to mental health, and to some of the specialty care and dental services. Limited, but there is something. So Sun River has been on the forefront of that, and they've educated me, they've helped to raise me, and they also did something kind of wild, which was during the last administration in 2022. They made a recommendation for me to serve as one of 12 individuals and on the National Advisory Council for Migrant and Agricultural Health in Washington, D.C. So this is something that I'm going to be starting next week, and I will be serving for the next 4 years with this administration. And it is not a very popular advisory committee to be on with migrant health, but the focus of the work is really to establish and ensure that workers and health providers and healthcare leaders are able to have an impact on what we do throughout the country. This was established in 1975, and it was because of the work championed by Cesar Chavez in California and bringing attention to a lot of the injustice that that was related to the health injustice that was related. So thank you, Tom. Yeah. So I don't know. I may come back for another candle next month.
Okay. Can I just say, I want you very much to break any rule that we already have and light as many candles as you feel would be useful. I think they work. So I'm all about it. Do we have enough candles? And is the chalice filled? Please go light candles.
Yes.
We would love it.
I will do that. Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to do that because that's going to help me. That would help illuminate the focus and not to, you know, we really have to take good care of each other through all of this activism. I think that we are all going to be embarked on for the next 4 years. And I know that this faith body at the state level and at the national level has never flinched away from leading and really standing up for human rights and really standing up for social justice. And that's why when Tom invited me, there wasn't even a hesitation. And I was absolutely, because I've always admired the work. In particular, admired the work that you do with your young adolescent people. And I think that there's something for all faith bodies to learn from with the education that some of the Unitarian young people get through their Sunday school here as it relates to their autonomy, their sexuality, and all of that. So I am you know, I don't want to say a convert because I'm a cultural Catholic and I show up there quarterly just to be sure they're doing what they got to do. But
Can I ask one question?
sure.
Clarified something for me about how it is that they are now using this identification to pay in taxes, but not getting any benefit from it. And everybody asks me, well, how's that possible? They don't have social security numbers. So now I understand what that situation is, because I keep on saying they pay in, but they don't benefit. One of the things I wanted to know was I keep on hearing people say, yeah, they're giving all of our money to the immigrants and we don't get anything. Where are they getting the idea that states or federal are paying all kinds of money to them, taking it away from people who would normally get it who are citizens? Is there where are they getting these ideas and where does that come from? Because I hear it all, whenever the people who have problems with it have a problem, they're always saying that, and I want to know where that comes from.
I think it comes from us not doing a very good job with creating these little sound bites for 90 seconds for a TikTok, where, which is, we've kind of come down to governance by TikTok in a certain realm. But the truth is, just to answer your question, is that New York State residents who are undocumented currently pay 3.1 billion in state and local taxes. This includes 920 million in sales tax, 1 billion in property tax, and 1.2 billion in personal and business tax. People who are undocumented pay an effective tax rate of 10.6% by New York State. So what that means is each undocumented person, by the data that's at the end, the last slide, that they are paying 10.6% in taxes compared to a New York State filer that is paying between 11.1 and 13.8. So we're talking about a few percentages off, but it is believed that if they are able to have a pathway to citizenship, that they will be able to make a stronger contribution because they will be able to participate much more fully, in whether it is in a pension plan, with an employer, with a 401k, with all of these different types of ways that we all contribute that are in a sense ways of contributing to the tax base.
So when people say, or I hear people say, do you think it's just something that's some false statement that has been handed down, that people believe that these people are getting money from the government, getting money, not giving money, but getting money from the government and taking it away from our natural, whatever, born citizens? I hear this a lot from people who have something in their head, don't know where they got it from. I don't know what to say when I hear them say that.
I think if we're armed with an elevator speech really quick, but that's an observation. When you see these buses coming in and when you see the short-term expense, there is a short-term expense at the front end. So that is the reality. The short-term expense at the front end is the challenge in getting new immigrants settled and shelter and, finding the long-term housing, some of the legal services and definite education for their children. But once people are settled in, then it shifts and then it's a very, very different story.
Okay, so now I know what I have to say. you know, because people keep on saying it and it just makes me a little crazy because I don't know what to say to them. And they expect me to say something for some reason. So thank you.
One of the, at the end, one of the tax policy wonk links there has a very interesting table because it shows you what somebody makes as an undocumented, their contribution, but if they had legal status, the amount more, that there is an added amount more that they would be able to contribute to total revenue. So,
Where are those statistics?
it's the last slide, Tom, if you want to just, this first one from the ITEP is a not-for-profit, nonpartisan tax policy organization. And that is a great, I like that. And, you know, that's for the whole country, and you could go state by state as well. And I've also included information from our comptroller with their rural roundtable and some of those reports, because those reports are very helpful. Another thing I included there, Tom, if you could just go back, I just want to go through that slide.
Well, we can't,
Oh, sorry.
we can't see it, so it's, but I'll get it,
No,
but
don't
Tom will
worry
give it
about
to you.
I
It's
have
okay.
a copy of that slide, so I can tell you everything that is on there. I also included a link. The Unitarians, Universalists at the state level are part of a covenant of denominations that support the rural migrant ministry. And they have new office space now in Fallsburg, in South Fallsburg. And we will be doing some work there. But the Rural and Migrant Ministry is probably going to be one of our hubs, and they do a lot of good work. They help congregations, and they really, I think, root congregations in what they're good at, and just really helping us when things go wrong, and helping us how to untangle these knots when everybody's emotional and everybody's maybe not at their best. I think that's when we really need the faith community to step in and to lead. I'm just going to leave this here. This is something RMM always put forth, which is the Farm Worker Sabbath. And this is from when we had the Farm Worker Justice Campaign active, but it really is about immigrant communities and welcoming immigrant people. And it has some nice information. I also included at the end a little bit of information on Sun River, their services. If you come across anyone who needs basic care, primary mental health, or primary dental work, a lot of this very, very basic stuff, there is a safety net system. It's not as deep and it's not as profound as real healthcare, as like a universal single payer system that we should have in this country. But it is something there that if you come across someone who needs support.
Thank you for your presentation and the links that you sent. What I can do is I can send that out with the next email blast.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
So
Thank
anybody
you.
who is interested in that, watch the email and look for
Wonderful.
the attachment. When I send out the announcement for next week's program again, I'll attach that.
That'd be great.
Thank
Thank you.
I want to thank you. Can I light a candle?
I want, yes, lots of candles, whatever's there. Like a lot of them.
Are there?
Otherwise,
Oh, okay, great. Let's see. All right. So I want to light this candle here in hopes of that we all continue to reach for the best in each other, that our wise people come forth and help us with some of these difficult moments that may be in front of us, and that we understand our solidarity, and that we can remain united even when we may not necessarily understand the angst and the anguish that our neighbors have, but that we continue to reach for the best in each other. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I am going to ask, for someone to come and extinguish the chalice, but can we leave that one last candle still burning? Or can we leave it all still burning for a little bit of time so to make sure that we don't blow out that candle? Okay. The chalice is now extinguished, but its light lives on in the minds and hearts and souls of each one of us. Carry that flame with you as you leave this place and share it with those you know, those you love, and most especially with those you have yet to meet. And I just, before I go, I always love to read the thing that Art Kolbjornsen wrote. He wrote it for us. It's a UUDF benediction, and he writes, he's a member, but he doesn't show up very often. As you leave this place, take the spirit of the fellowship with you, embrace your friends and welcome the strangers. Do your best to love your neighbor as well as yourself. Strive to be good stewards of the resources that have been loaned to you. Remember, the earth is a treasure and should be honored and respected. Be prepared to face reality as it presents itself to you. You will have victories and failures, so bring them to this fellowship when we meet again, and we will revel in the former and support you in the latter. Until we gather again, go in peace. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you, Sandy. That was just a wonderful talk, and I so appreciate your work.
All is unity, no one is separated. All is unity, no one is separated. All is unity. All is unity.
So I'm imagining that there's some refreshments.
There is lemon bread pudding.
Wow. Well, everybody enjoy and enjoy conversation. I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you. Take care.
Good. Yeah. All roads lead to the river recorder.
Jill, but two things unrelated to this, but related to you, is I have two family members here as older.
Who?
I can take this. Deanna Roberts.
Okay, and